Yadamin, Ushamatan.
Let's keep your masks on if you're in the room, please, everybody. No offense or anything. It's nothing personal.
It's the IRAQAFELLA Show, Season 2, with special guest, Suhel Nafar of Dam.
Peace, it's the IRAQAFELLA Show. I am your brother Narcy. You know who I am. But we have a special edition of the IRAQAFELLA Show with one of my best friends, one of my homies from back in the day to this day, the one and only Suhel Nafar of them, if I can say that, you know? No longer
always.
of them, but always of them, right?
Yeah.
Suhel, how you feeling, bro?
I'm good, man.
We are
Miss you.
both jet lagged. We are in an
Yeah.
undisclosed location right now
Yeah.
across the earth. We just both landed.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm on California time.
You're on California time. I'm on Montreal time. I wanted to sit with you first and foremost because you're one of my favorite people. I see you several times throughout the year. And we kind of have this like converging history in our life. We've been through a lot together.
Yeah.
So if we were to start at the top, I think one thing I want the audience to be aware of is your history. Can you tell us a bit about Palestine, Dam, and like the beginning of your music journey?
Well, as you mentioned, I used to be part of DAM, the first Palestinian hip-hop group. Grew up in a city called Lid. Lid is between Yafa and Jerusalem.
Shout out Lid.
Oh, yeah. I started in my music journey when I was 14 years old. It all started, I would say, from the MC Hammer, the Michael Jackson, and then moved a bit to
Pac and Big.
to Pac and Big, and that's why I speak English now. It's because of these people. This is my English teachers, let's say. And then, being in Palestine in an early era of hip hop in this region, and specifically within Palestine, we had to learn to do everything out of nothing. And what I mean by that is literally building the stage. And when I say building a stage, it wasn't for us. It wasn't like fighting to go on stage. It was like, how do we build a stage? And I'm talking about hammer
and nails,
literally, right? And that also so there's a positive thing about it, and there's pros and cons about like starting something fresh and new. Is first because you have to struggle double, but you learn so much shit during that time. So that's why I kind of got that skills of being animator and motion graphic design and then filmmaker and then director. You do the same. You start as a musician and then
You move on.
It becomes you're part of the management, you're part of social media, you're part of rollout, you're part of marketing, you're part of director. So it builds up in many levels.
Obviously, music reaches us through different mediums. I think initially music hit me through my sister Hella, who was listening to more pop stuff like George Michael and shit like that. But then when hip hop kind of came into our life, it started as R&B with Belle Biv DeVoe, and then it became MC Hammer, as you said, and then it became NWA, and the real shit started leaking into our life. Can you tell me like your earliest experience with hip hop music? What was the first tape or CD that you got in Palestine? I was in Canada at the time, but in Palestine, what was the first tape that came to you?
First cassette. For some reason, I remember myself breakdancing in my khalo's khutbah party. Breakdancing to Michael Jackson Biggie record. I do remember that. I remember because there's like some footage of that, right? But MC Hammer definitely was one of the early stuff, and then it was a mix. But I would say the first CD that I had in my hand, original CD, not bootleg, was West Side Connection, which amazing because later on I learned that one of the producers were Frederick, Palestinian. So that was like a circle after I knew later on that actually one of the first original CDs that I held in my hand
was produced by Palestinian.
Yeah, so it was fun to know. But that was the first original.
That's amazing. When hip hop got introduced to me, it wasn't political for me. It was more of a vibe, and I also wasn't aware of who I was. I knew where I was from, but and I knew the connection of like war and conflict to where I was from and where I was sitting at in Canada. But I didn't make that connection in the music until later in my teens. But when you grow up in a place like Lid in Palestine, you're immediately aware of your identity, which is crazy because you're on your own land.
Not really. If you grew up in the West Bank and in Gaza, you immediately
Are
aware. But if you grow up as a Palestinian in 48 with the Israeli ID, so you're controlled by the Israeli government. So your education system is not through an Palestinian educational department. It goes through the Shabak, which is like the internal security service of this country. So they are responsible to your education. And you don't automatically grow up knowing who you are, and you actually growing up hating who you are. Also, because you lived in poverty. When you see like I would say the European Jewish Israelis have better neighborhood, and you blame yourself, right? So this is one. And as I mentioned, the education system, not just by what they teach you in school, but also by who they hire to be your teacher.
Because in Canada, you know, they don't teach you the history of the indigenous in the way that I learned it later in my life. So when you're in Palestine, growing up in Lid under the Israeli occupation,
so you learned you're a zero. You learned you're nothing. You learned that there was nobody here before the existence of this country. So you grew up with a low self-esteem, and you grew up with hating who you actually are and trying to avoid who you are. That's how early stages, you know. So it takes time for you to actually be like, wait. Why do I hate myself? Why am I in poverty? Why my school system say this kind of thing? And why is this education, like, why my books look this way? And then you start to understand. So it takes time.
Can you explain to the audience that might not know what a Palestinian 48er is? I know what it is, but
so Palestine. The reason I say 48er is because in 1948, when Israel occupied the land, there was around 20% of us who were lucky to still be there, and we're still around 20 to 27% these days. And it's Palestinians who have Israeli ID, Israeli passport. We have that on the paper as blue ID, but we don't have it in our daily life. Like, we don't get
you don't get the privilege,
the privilege of European, Jewish, Israeli, white rights.
I want to get back into that. I think we'll circle back to Palestine, but you know, your sibling. Your older sibling, Tamer, who is, you know, I would say one of the first Arab MCs to ever make noise. And shout out to Tamer. I see you. We miss you. You know, I remember when I watched Slingshot Hip Hop, which was directed by Jackie Saloom. Jackie Reem Saloom. We see your bedroom in that film. And there's the Pac posters and all the CDs, and your brother talking about learning the lyrics. And was he the one that introduced you to the music? Because you're a couple of years. There's a couple of years between you guys.
Yeah, he's 4 years older.
Yeah. So, was he the one that pulled you into them, and kept you around him, or was it a natural progression into the group with Mahmoud? Like, tell me about that formation.
Both. He got into hip hop because of me, because he was more Backstreet Boys. I was more hip hop. It's not a diss. It's not a diss.
Hey,
Backstreet Boys were lit.
You've always been a pop star, bro.
I was more into the hip hop right away. So in terms of learning, liking the culture and the hip hop culture, I think it came through me. But going to DAM and entering the DAM world, it was because of him. We lived in a really small apartment. We both shared one room, the bedroom that you see in Slingshot Hip Hop. So our beds were next to each other, and the room was filled with papers Tamer was writing it since he was a kid. That's I think one of the reasons that he's a really dope writer, because he really worked on his pen. We worked since he was a kid on it. And I remember once I took those papers and I went to my parents, I was like, look how much he writes, like, and as a kid, like, without even thinking what's going to happen after. And my parents were like, what? That's all him? I was like, yeah.
Wow.
So yes, I got him into the hip hop culture, but he got me into the hip hop industry, because he's the one. Because I liked the filmmaking more during that time, and I went to the studio to film him recording his first ever record.
So you've always been visual.
Yeah,
always been visual.
I went to film him, and it was a really bad song that he was recording. It was called "The Untouchable." From his EP back then called Stop Selling Drugs.
What year was this?
97.
Wow, bro.
Maybe,
That's a long time. Now that's a long time ago.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And then I was filming him. It was him recording. My dad was there, who drove us to the studio, who was driving us everywhere. And then it was me. I was filming him, and then I was like, why won't you record my hook? And then I went in and I did a really terrible job, but it was still better than what he did, but it was bad. And I remember it was like just kind of a DMX vocals type of thing, like me screaming. I always was screaming, right? And that's how I got into it. It was through him. It was his lyrics, and he had really strong part in lyrics. I had more the strong part of like the melodies and the visuals.
The rest of your history with them is pretty much documented in the film, so I'm gonna cut to the trailer right now.
طلع احلى الاسم Fear of a Black Planet. كيف البني ادم الابيض بيجرب يوقف التكاثر الاسود. فهون بالبلاد هاي في Fear of an Arabic nation.
The trouble has been most widespread in the West Bank, where stone throwers have again been out in force, despite being outgunned by the Israelis.
تخيليها انه انا عايش كل مره بحكي عربي بيجي واحد بوليس بوقفه ما بيقدروش يسمعوا لغتنا بدهم يمحونا.
اشتغلت ماكدونالد 3 سنين عشان حكيت عربي بطلوني من الشغل.
Arabs who live inside Israel make up nearly 20% of the population, so they pose a sizable threat.
احنا حياتنا باللد الحكومة طرق تسد وجثث احنا نعد هيك.
شبعت غزة بسجن كبير. بتمنى انه اطلع الضفة واقابل رابرز، بس للاسف يعني الاحتلال مش مخلينا انه مقفل الطريق من كل مكان.
الواحد خلص من كتر الدمار ما بقدرش يعني يحبس جوا اي احساس، فاحنا انا اتجهت للراب حتى اطلع اللي عندي.
هاي اول مرة اللي راح اكون بضفة بدون ما حدا يعرف.
اول مرة غني على المسرح، اول مرة.
وحاليا متوجهين على إيرز عشان نطلع من إيرز الضفة ان شاء الله.
في نقطة وراها والله، هاي في نقطة وراها.
العالم ما بدنا اياهم يحكوا عشان بكون.
So yeah, I mean, coming out of them, I think when I met you guys, it was the mid 2000s in North America, during the second Intifada. Was it the first Intifada? Third?
Second Intifada was 2001.
Yeah, so around 2001, after the second Intifada, after 9/11, we started all converging in North America, touring.
Yeah.
We would meet in places like San Francisco to do Nakba shows.
Yeah.
And then we met in New York, where we had that infamous Jay-Z encounter where I froze when I met Jay-Z in the street.
You can't tell that story this way. That story needs an episode.
Yeah. I mean, I will tell it briefly, but we were walking down the street with Shadia Mansour and Dam and Sundus and Jackie, and I was telling Jackie,
You had your DSLR.
I had
camera.
a DSLR. I was trying to be a cameraman at the time.
Look at me, I'm paparazzi.
I was taking photos of dogs in the street and shit. And then I was like, Jackie, it's crazy. Every time I come to America, I end up meeting like all my idols, and I imagine we meet Jay-Z. And then like literally 10 minutes later, we're in Tribeca. We stop at a corner, and Jay-Z pulls up in the Volume 3 Jeep with no doors, the silver Jeep. And
we were right after a screening with Reem, Sundos, and Dam, and Shadia. We were after a screening for Slingshot Hip Hop, and I had my suitcase
of the merch. Right? So I remember everything going in slow motion, like, and I go, oh my God, it's Jay-Z.
Yeah, I don't remember.
And I froze. I did not take a photo. I had a perfect camera.
You did take photos, but of your
of other
feet,
shit.
dogs, street, and stuff like that. I remember Mahmoud from Dam was also like for then. Shadia just like looked like this while Reem was just yelling and saying, "Yo, it's Jay-Z!" And then Tamer just going to Jay-Z, taking the selfie, and you're just taking photos of the floor. And I'm struggling, just stopped in the middle of the road, threw my suitcases out, and I was like,
pull the CD out,
trying to pull the CD. I was like, I'm hoping it would be a CD or something because I didn't know it got stuck, like always. And everybody's running in slow-mo around me while I'm like,
it was amazing.
And then I got in, and I got Dedication, Dam's album, and that's what I gave him. And it was actually nice of him because the light turned green, and he didn't go. He waited for me to come and like give him. I was like, "Yo, check it out! It's a Palestinian hip hop Dedication album."
His security guard hopped out. He was like, "Chill, these my people."
Yeah.
But long story to say that we were meeting at this point in history where Arab hip hop was becoming larger than just like these pockets. We were becoming a community.
Yeah.
And it was a very magical moment, but it was also a bit too early, I think, in general, for the world to accept outside of our community, even within our communities, to accept what we were doing as a viable form of communication.
We also didn't have tools like today.
Yeah.
It was pre-Facebook.
It was pre-Facebook, pre-YouTube,
Yeah.
pre-Spotify, and all these like DSPs that we put our music out on. So like, we were still CD hand to hand.
Yeah.
And towards the end of that era, I would say, which is like 2007, 2008, 2009, we were already like 10 years into it. And at that point when we were hanging out, I could tell that you were kind of shifting out of music and getting more into visual work that was still like adjacent to music, but you kind of didn't want to be a musician as much. Can you tell me why that is? Like, what was the feeling that you were having after touring and being a Palestinian artist, being put on this pedestal when you would go to the West and people would like consume you and you would go back to Lid and come back and go back to Lid?
Yeah.
What was the frustration that you were feeling around music at that time?
I always wanted to empower my skills in filmmaking and motion graphic design. That's why, like, a lot of the times while we'd be touring, I would be working on animation to project in the back. That would be translation of our lyrics. Sometimes we'd be recording in the studio. Tamer Mahmoud would be writing the lyrics to go in and record, and I'd be like, oh, there's this thing called After Effects. Let me learn it. And I would be just like learning that and not focused on like writing and reading. And that was a big sign to me. I was like, what am I doing? I'm focused on this. And the shift you mentioned is actually totally right. And it was during those years where you could see me like working less on melodies, not really writing lyrics, and like, okay, I have this idea of a script, I have this idea of visual shit, I have this idea. I was like, okay, maybe we could do this. I heard about this social media page. Maybe we can build marketing plan around it. So I think it was always there.
Yeah,
Like,
you were always strategic, always.
First time in the studio was because of camera. First time ever because I was filming Tamer, you know. It wasn't because I went to the studio to record. So I think it always was a thing for me. It was always here. I think it's just music came just because it was part of also like who I am, I think, and Tamer. And then it slowly, I kept realizing more and more, like, I'm better there. I'm happier there, but also I'm better there, like, as skills. I felt like my writing skills were just getting weaker, while my more, like, visual or artistic or behind-the-scenes strategy was getting stronger.
Look, I think a lot of our journeys are very much written for us. A lot of these, like, signs that we don't notice in the moment end up reflecting on our path. And with you, I've always told you this. It's always been like, I've always observed your growth as a person in the music scene and always admired it. But I've also seen your shifts and like why you've shifted. So when you went to Spotify, you were one of the people responsible for their Diaspora program, if you will, for lack of better words.
It was helping Spotify to launch in the region, in the Arab world. But my focus was how to build the global Arab hub, and strategically how do I shift this industry to the diaspora, but also to the people who like Arabic music and culture, because it's not about just Arabs, it's about also music, you know?
Yeah, what was it? Like, what was that? Because that's very complicated, as you know. Where we're from is so many different different cultures within cultures. Yeah. So how did you research that and build this like infrastructure for our community, which, you know, falls off a lot of people to know that you did that on your own in a way, like for our community. Or there was a group of people for the Latin and for the subcontinent, but you know,
I was doing the Arab stuff.
Yeah, tell me how you started that program in your mind, you know.
That was actually my last kind of transition of like, I'm done with performing, done with recording. I'm out of the studio. I'm here to be behind the scenes or build the strategy for whoever is on stage. I remember I was in Palestine shooting something called Lit Tent, working for the PMX team, and also recording for Dam's last album, which was Ben Hana Mana. And while there, I got a few calls and emails, and you were one of the people who were like, yo, check out this thing in Spotify, and you fit, check it out. And then
because I was like, yo, Sundus, would you move to New York? He was like, no, I'm not moving to America. I was like, okay, I got to hit my homies.
And then you said that to me,
yeah,
right?
Of course, yeah.
that was like the final transition, because then I had to be like, yo, I can't be on the album. It will be conflict of interest. So I took myself out of the cover, took myself out of the credit. But the opening of the album, you'll hear my voice. By the way. And I have a solo track in there as well called Brooklyn. And then I joined Spotify, which was a lot of learning. It was almost 3 years, and I loved it. I loved what I built. I loved the vision. I loved how I grew also strategically. And I did a lot of research of basically the research that I did and the things that I wanted to learn while there is where I am now. I did a lot of research and a lot of learning from K-pop community, from hip hop. I learned how strategically they grew the culture through the teams that did the K-pop. I met a lot of like K-pop bands, but also teams of K-pop bands. The Latin team were the people who onboarded me to this role, so I learned so much from them and worked a lot, watched them working a lot on a lot of amazing projects. Same with Afropop culture and what's happening right now. I saw that in early stages. So my research was always, and the strategy that I built there was, okay, like if this worked this way, how would it work for us? And I always I'm foodie, I love food, right? And I always like to look at music as in a food perspective first, before anything, like before music.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
I feel like
that's so
taco came in way before reggaeton came in.
Yeah,
right?
Oh, you mean like the
cuisine of the culture.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I feel like hummus has now been everywhere.
Oh, hummus is, we know.
It's hard everywhere. Like, okay, so now we're coming, right? That's how I see it, right? That's from a cultural perspective, cuisine comes first, the music comes second. From a tech, it's like, okay, tech is gaming first and then music is second. And we've already been, I feel like, dominating kind of the gaming area. So music is coming, and then our cuisine has been like, now is everywhere. Everybody's trying to steal the credit for it as well. You know what I mean? So I feel the music was there. So I was researching this kind of things as well, but also I was researching numbers and the history of why there are this type of diaspora there, and things like that. People. I'm still shocked that there's like, not shocked. Unfortunately, history. With our political climate change that is happening in the world, there's so many Iraqis in Canada, for example, so U.S. or Europe. And walking in Sweden, you hear Arabic right now. A lot of Syrian.
We're everywhere.
Germany, like if you look at Brazil, there are more Lebanese in Brazil than in Lebanon, like double the number. If it's 7 million, I think, Lebanon, then it's 15 million in Brazil. In Chile, there's so many Palestinians. So all of like Mexico, even cuisine, back to the cuisine, like El Pastor is actually shawarma immigrants who like mixed it up together. Chili green sauce is a da'a. So it's like, it's all this like mixed cultures and the cuisine, all of that. I had to research it, and I enjoyed it because I learned so much from it, right?
جوعتني, man, I'm hungry.
Sorry, me too. But that's how I built my, strategically, I was looking at it in that perspective and like more open.
Is that just an excuse for you to go eat?
That's one, but but also if you look at the numbers these days, and it's actually that strategy or the plan that I was building, if you look at your numbers or the analytics of a lot of the artists today, you would see those references that I gave are, this is probably your top 5 artists. Audience, listeners. If it's Germany, you probably see Indonesia or some of the top countries that are streaming this kind of music.
No, definitely. So, like the pointers that I learned from you in that time, and I'm a very niche artist, so like the things that you made me think about, not only while making the music, but also how to strategically push my music. It really helped me understand my audience more, which is something I was very negligent to, because I'm from this like CD handing era, the digital era. Although I embraced it, I didn't fully know that I wasn't embracing it properly, And then recently you shifted out of that, and you're at Empire, which is run by Arabs, shout out to Ghazi. And you're in charge of the Empire Swana? Wana?
Yeah, I called it Wana.
Okay, good. Because Swana is like, Black Swana. It doesn't feel right.
I like terminology, and I like things to flow.
Smoother.
It's smoother.
Yeah.
Wana is West Asia and North Africa. And one of the reasons I didn't want to call it Middle East is because if we as Empire want to build something that is more innovative and more futuristic and more independent for our region, for our artists, it shouldn't come, the term of this department shouldn't be a term that was written and came up by a British kingdom kind of thing. If we want to build an independent vision, it has to be like
separate to
you get
what
the fuck out of our face.
Yeah.
You fucked us up for so long. Let us build our thing our own way, and I'll go by the map for now. And that's why I just decided to do like no Middle East. This is West Asia, North Africa.
You know, you're somebody that we came up in the same era, as I said. So the way we view industry is directly tied to colonialism. Like there's a similar. It's a similar kind of architecture, right? The way that culture is treated within industry is very exploitative, just as colonialism was exploitative to culture. And this is a deep-seated problem in the music industry and the film industry, that our narratives don't come out directly from our mouths without being tailored for an audience or for a producer or a production house, right? So in this situation with Empire Wana, you have a huge responsibility in your hands, that is to, as you said, shape the story directly from our mouths, right? And to challenge the spaces of music industry within a model such as Empire, which started off as a kind of like an independent distro, and it's still independent in its model, but it's become a major in a sense, in the sense of like who they carry are major artists, right? So what is if you were to give me a mission statement for Empire Wana, what would you say it is? Like, what is your ultimate goal with this program that you're creating now?
The shorter sentence, I would say build more empires. And when I say that is that to build an industry, you know, I'll go back to the Latin example, since I said I researched.
We're going back to tacos? We're going to
tacos,
back
exactly.
to tacos now? Okay.
I'll give the Latin culture or the Latin music and reggaeton of what it is today, because what it's been, last year was the first time that a Latin artist was top most streamed artist globally at Spotify, right? That didn't happen before. How did this get to this point? So first, cuisine, culture, right? But also more players around the industry, and there's a song that can drive an artist, a song that can break an artist, that can break more artists, that can break more teams, that can break more industry people that will be behind the scenes to support all these new artists coming, that will drive the culture, that will drive the new genre, that will drive the industry that we've been working on building for so long. And how do you do that really? You have to go back to the base of like, okay, you need more partners on the ground. You need to scale those partners on the ground. A lot of the labels that's happening today, their A&R tool is TikTok, and it's not just going to the ground and being like,
touching the artist,
what are you trying to build? You're trying to build a label? Cool. What's missing for you to build a label? Hiring people is going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let me provide these tools to you and help you build your own label, build your own vision, help you with that. And it's not going to be, it's going to be you building it. It's you building your own empire. We're just giving you the infrastructure around it. And that's the vision of how do we have more of all of us around, behind the scenes, on stage, everywhere. And we'll and if you look at K-pop, it's kind of like this, because K-pop really was first time aired on TV in Korea in the 80s, I think, or 90s, early 90s or late 80s for the first time. But we only heard about K-pop in the last 5 years. But if you look at one of the reasons why it really broke is a lot of those people that were in the 80s and 90s are the people that are behind the scenes. A lot of the first actually bands that performed on stage and on TV are now running
the shit in the background.
Labels. And Gum Style, which is maybe a silly song, but it helped shift a lot of things.
Of course,
So how do you get to that point? So it's going to be a lot. It's going to be just the same, like people who were on stage and now they're behind the scene because they felt the gap. They know what's missing. حسوها على بشرهم. They felt it on the يعني we say in Arabic اسأل المجرب مش الطبيب, right? Which ask the person that went through it and not the doctor.
Of course. Ask the patient, not the doctor.
بالضبط.
I mean, I mean, it isn't one thing that breaks a culture into the mainstream.
It's going to be a lot
if you look, if you look at where we're at now as Arabs in mainstream, in the mainstream story, you know, what I've noticed about North America and the way they accept culture is like it's one at a time.
Yeah.
You know, you had the South Asian community breakthrough in America, and then you had Egypt breakthrough through Rami Malek and Rami Youssef in a different way and through the TV shows. And now you have someone like Mo Amr who's breaking the Palestinian voice in a very American, like a very like in the country way. And that's how North America.
I have to go back to food. So this is the burrito strategy. No, it's not the taco strategy. It's the burrito strategy because burrito is Mexican American cuisine.
I really
right?
love you, bro. You're hilarious. Wallah. So burrito, why? Tell me why burrito, not taco. Is it because it's wrapped up and it's warmed up, or
no? Because burrito is more an American thing. It's not. Mexico didn't have burrito. They had tacos and things that looked like it, but American
made the burrito,
localized it and made it more American. So how do we do our own
shawarma burrito?
Something, yeah.
Falafel burrito, hummus burrito.
You know, vegan shawarma has been a hit lately. You know, there's a lot of those. So.
If we just circle back to Palestine, we started with Palestine, but I think it's important to always ground ourselves back to where we're from. Most recently, we witnessed an aggression on the ground in Palestine, what was done to Gaza, but also all around the country. It seemed as though the violence towards Palestinians was turned up even more. Not that it ever was switched off, but the public perception of Palestine changed this time around, I think, more than ever. And it still needs a lot of work in order for people to humanize Palestinians more than they slightly do now. What do you think our role is in the diaspora to further this? You know, one thing that I did was the Musicians for Palestine group of artists that signed this list. I was part of the team that put that together, and I remember contacting you saying, like, do you think this is something that's going to work, or is it just another thing that we signed that goes nowhere? But it actually grew into something bigger than I thought it would. Outside of these kind of actions, as people who are executives now and then culture movers, what can we do to further bring Palestine into public consciousness as a human rights issue?
Yeah, well, you know, it's a lot of pieces, a lot of puzzle pieces for the final picture that we're all trying to build. So there's going to be a lot of players that will get us there, and it's happening. It is always, you know. I read something once that says, like, in every protest or in every fight or in every revolution, you lose a lot, but you go a few steps forward. But I'm glad you mentioned the diaspora. I think the diaspora is going to be an important player. And not to go, I won't go far, but you can build a country through diaspora without bringing your colonialist mentality you learned in the diaspora if you do it in the right way. I read some research recently about the Desi diaspora, and there is in January, I hope I'm not wrong, in January there's a whole meeting that happens in India where people from all around the diaspora go there and meet, and they do all kind of project, and that's one of the reasons why it helped uplifting and take the economy a bit up. So how do we do these kind of things? Yes, the project that you mentioned is one thing, but also we need more execs behind the scene working on the project. It doesn't all has to be protest. It doesn't have to be all activists. It's good to have that, but it's also good to have people who are shifting things, building other things that representing the culture but not in your face. You need it all at this point. You know, we're all activists without shouting that we're activists, if you look at what we're trying to all build or get to.
Amazing. Suhel, I love you, bro.
I love you too, man.
It's the IRAQAFELLA Show. I'm your brother Narcy Tune. Next week we got a special guest. Peace.
قندرة عتيقة على راسك منتظر الزين يسباب شيء. Listen, man. You get the Nars face, belligerent heart rate, religious at part breaks, militant talk phase. I'm iller than part Saratan, ya Shamavan. Heavy though I lost weight this Ramadan. And Devin Yasin, I'm feeling mad for it. Cause who next, fam? Arab X-Clan, Sand Glorious. I crumble peace like white clans in Europe. Our stands enormous. All we really see is violence and torment. Mic stands and torrent.
آخر فيرس بدلت الشرايين كوابل شبكة كل فلسطين هون تحط فيها دم أكتر من أفلام ترنتينو مين هون ثابت غيري قلبه بيت حارة فور معلق عليه افتال البيع دجاج عاطر فيش عندكم بيت الواقع قبيح بقلبي نكت الأرض مش قريبة عليك مع كل هاد عايش على الركب قولي شو اسم الأغنية إذا عن الشعب العربي سميها قلبي وإذا عن الزعم العربي كلبي You write something for قلبي
Write something for قلبك؟ شو يعني؟
for قلبك انت يعني قلبي موجود وين ما اهلي وين ما مولود وين ما الذكريات تطوف عندي تعال شوف عندي محبة للموسيقى لأول حفلة لأول وحدة تطلب خدمة محمود نعم ممكن ختمة موجود في بلد فيها الحطة مش موضة بل أسلوب فيه بقول للأعداء انتو هون موضة في قلبي بدق في نغمات وبمر لحام فكل اللي ضل حط سماعات وأقول رقصني يا عم
اسمع بطل حامل تقالات حرفيا مع قفيات حميات تتولى العضلات القلبية قلبي شايف فرصة بلا صعوبة وبعقلي رسالة محسوبة على ورقة مكتوبة بدك ولا ما بدك محبوسة قلبي هو الهيب هوب لأنه هو أساس هالبلوزة كوابل ممدودة من استوديو نارتي للجسمي فلسطيني عراقي على راسي
Being in the city I grew up in and have my brothers come down and rock like this, it was a pleasure. And having my sisters on stage with us as well. So we like to say, peace, 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 peace.